What is a church? This must be a church because it's quite big and it's even got a tower. Not only that, but it even says it's a church outside. When Jesus said, "I will build my church," did he mean he would build this? And here we have another church. It also has a tower. It's also in Muswell Hill. But it doesn't say it's a church, it says it's a restaurant. So is this a church? And in this restaurant that was once used for Christian worship, we used to have Bible studies. When we had Bible studies, did that make it into a church again? Was our part and our table where we had the Bible studies a church? What is church? What we're going to do today is look at what you could argue is the first word. It may not be the most important word, but the first word that describes what church is. And we can say it's the first word because Jesus used it in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 16, at a point when Simon, who Jesus has also called Peter, has finally said who Jesus really is. He's come to that realization. Let's read about it. "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it." So Peter has just confessed for the first time that Jesus is the Messiah. And Jesus then goes into this description of what he will build on that confession of faith. He will build a church, as the English translations put it. But the word in Greek is ekklesia. Now, if English is your first language, you'll recognize straight away that this is a word which we still kind of use. The word ecclesiastical, which is very long, and most of us, even who are Christians, don't like it very much, but that's because it's long. And we wouldn't want to say that we were ecclesiastical, though in fact it would be a very accurate word to use to describe every Christian. So is ecclesia a good word? Well, it's got to be a good word because it's the word that effectively Jesus used, or that describes the word that Jesus used, and then is taken up in the New Testament to describe the people of God. They're also described as a temple, as a body, as a bride of Christ, and all those words have deep and important meanings that go far beyond ecclesia. But ecclesia is in many ways the first word. What does it mean? Well, if ecclesiastical and all that sounds very long and complicated, you can just stick with the ek, because the ek means out. And the rest of the word is a word that means, let's go for the word summoned. Summoned out. You could say called out. But summoned is a good word because it implies that someone authoritative has called us out. You could almost think of the Sergeant Major mustering an army to the flag. In the UK, you can imagine the assembly at school where the head teacher summons the school to assembly, and you need therefore to go. So it's that. Assembly is quite a good word, but when we think of the word assembly in general, we think, do I want to go to it or don't I? Do I want to assemble or would I rather stay home? It doesn't mean that. It means when God says, come out and be part of my people, as he did to the fishermen by the Sea of Galilee, which Matthew has already recorded in his gospel, as he did to Matthew, or as he was called, Levi himself, who was sitting at his tax collector's booth, collecting taxes and keeping some for himself, as the tax collectors did in that society. And Jesus calls him to follow. And therefore, Matthew is summoned out. Can you hear the summons? It comes even in a video like this, because I have no qualms in saying to you now that Jesus summons you to follow him. He calls the whole world to follow him. The point about Peter's confession is that Jesus is the Messiah. He is the world's king. And we are to follow him. You say, I belong to a different religion. I don't really believe in God. It's not really my thing. I went to Sunday school. I lived down the road from your church and came to look at this, but it's not for me. Oh, but it is for you. You can say it's not for you by saying no, but it was still for you. You have said no to something that was for you. The summons is delivered to the whole world, and it's an invitation to come to Jesus. But whatever it is we're summoned out from, we're summoned out from that to be, first of all, followers of Jesus. And that's what the church is, the ekklesia. It is those who are summoned out and who have responded to that call. And to Jesus. Remember, we're not being summoned out here to a British ecclesiastical institution. We're being summoned out to Jesus. I will build my church. It's not my church. People will often, because I'm a pastor, say to me, your church. I came to your church on Sunday. That's rubbish. I'll be very polite if you say that, but it is actually rubbish. It's not my church. It's his church. I came to his church. You can come to his church. But it's Jesus' church. I will build my church. And however long someone becomes ingrained in a church culture, and of course in every church there are people who have been there for years, it's never their church. It's always his church. And that's a release for Christians as well, because what it means is that he builds his church. It's my task to say to you that you should be part of the church, the called out people of Jesus. But it's between you and him after that, whether or not you hear the call, whether you receive the summons. And that's going to be between you and him for the rest of eternity. I, like Peter of old, have the task of delivering the summons which comes from somebody else. So that's what the church is. It is a summoning out of human beings from the world that preoccupies them to the place where they are focused and centered on Jesus. The second thing you notice is not only is this a starting word, but it is a strong word. Because it turns out that the gates of Hades, Jesus says, will not prevail, will not overcome this summoning. Now, gates in Jesus' day were not garden gates or ornamental park gates. They were the gates of a city, a protection thing. And you imagine the city surrounded by its walls with its gates. And Jesus says it's like as if these people are locked in, but I'm going to summon them out, and the gates will not be able to keep them in. In other words, the church, the called out people, are going to have come from often the most unlikely of places. And we have seen that in the history of the church, where people who were opposed to the church, like Saul, who was one of the first great enemies of the church, who went from house to house in Jerusalem trying to find those people who are following Jesus, to put them in prison, to destroy the church, as we read in Acts chapter 8. Well, he ended up being one of the leading missionaries of the church, whose letters we still read as the New Testament today. He was summoned out, and the gates of hell were not able to prevail against the summoning of Saul, who became Paul. If the first word about church is the word out, leave those nets that you are mending. Leave that tax collector's booth, Levi, that you are sitting at, and come, says Jesus, follow me. And today, don't try and integrate an old way of life with being part of the people of Jesus. It is, as Jesus says elsewhere, being born again. It is a new life. It is a new way. It is a summoning out. And that is when the church is what the church should be.